Today, we are going to begin Chapter 1 in Science. You will need your directed reading 1.1, which is in your Ian, the interactive notebook that we started last week. You may want to have that available as I am teaching the lesson because the answers go in order. If you can't keep up with it that way, you can always go back and use the textbook because the answers will be in order in the textbook as well. We are going to begin with Section 1, which is Lesson 1. That's why the directed reading that goes along with it is labeled Directed Reading, DR 1.1. So in this section, we have Science and Scientist. And there are 3 objectives that you should know by the end of the lesson. The first, you should be able to describe 3 methods of investigation. You should be able to identify benefits of science in the world around you. And you should be able to describe 5 jobs that use science. And if you'll think back to our word search and our decoder from last week, there are several jobs that use science. I will have the brain pop and actually any videos attached to this lesson that you will need to go back and watch as well. So, what is science? Basically, everything in life that we think about, everything that you've ever questioned, you're doing science. So, science is the long definition, the knowledge gained by observing the natural world, and it's asking questions that can help you gather any knowledge that you seek. So just think about your own neighborhood, just in your mind right now. What are some questions you can ask about your surroundings? I know in past years, some of my kids would ask, why is the sky blue? I mean, have you ever thought about that? Science can answer it. What about the world beyond? What are some questions you can ask about deserts, forests, or beaches? What about the types of plants and animals that live in each of these places? These are all things that we're going to cover this year in 6th grade science. Okay, secondly, after you've asked that question, that begins your search for answers. So you begin to investigate. And the first step in that is research. And research involves looking up information in any material that you may have. It could be on the internet, in textbooks, magazines, or encyclopedias. You just have to be careful and make sure that they're reliable sources. Never ever use Wikipedia as a reliable source. The second step in investigation is when you observe things. So observation. You just take a look around to find answers to your question. If you're studying something such as plants, you would have your attention on those plants and you would watch them. The next is experimentation. You actually do that experiment. So if you've ever done a science fair project, you've gone through these steps. So you try an experiment to learn the answers to your question. So you're testing this word, your hypothesis, which in simple words is an educated guess. And I'm going to use that term loosely because you're not just making a wild guess. You've already done the research to come up with this hypothesis. So that's why it's called an educated guess. Well, why do you ask questions? That kind of started out our lesson. There are several different answers to why you would ask questions. One, it could answer society's needs. Think about what's going on in the world right now with COVID-19 and this coronavirus and just all the different ways that that has affected our lives since this fiasco began back in March. So there are all kinds of scientists that are researching this and trying to find answers that we desperately need so we can go back to living life quote unquote normally. It may be a new norm from what I've heard, but hopefully we will eventually get back to what we know is normal. So scientific research has led to many life-saving discoveries, such as medicines, weather predicting, and disease prevention. And that's just to name a few. So again, right now, they're trying to come up with a vaccine. If that happens, then we don't have to worry about the people that are at high risk actually contracting this disease and then dying from it or having long-term health problems from it. A second reason we ask science questions, basically, is scientists have learned to plan ahead. If we use up all of our resources that are here on Earth, if they're non-renewable, we can't get them back. So we need to learn how to use our resources wisely. And thirdly, healthy surroundings. Another way that scientists have helped is to reduce pollution, and they do that through finding ways that cars can produce less exhaust. So, for instance, running them on vegetable oil instead of gas or gasoline, or having an electric car where you can just go plug it in. So there are all kinds of scientists working on many, many different kinds of things out in the world today. And who knows, you may grow up to be one of those scientists as well. So here's just a handful. We have environmental scientists. They're scientists who study the environment. So they study how humans interact with their environment. We have cartographers. These are people who make maps of the surface of the earth. And then there are all types of engineers. An engineer is someone who takes that scientific knowledge that has been discovered and actually puts it to practical use. So they apply those skills. A zoologist, well, look at the root, zoo. So this person would study the lives and the needs of animals. And you have a science educator. That would be me. Someone who teaches others about science. In our next lesson, we will talk about scientific methods.